Some stories stick to you like a shadow, no matter how hard you try to shake them. This isn't just about fame or music or even the people you think you know. This is about what happens when the doors close, when the vault locks, and when the voices you hear aren't just echoes. There's something else entirely. I thought I was chasing a dream, but what I found instead made me see Beyoncé in a way I can never unsee. It started the way all big stories start, with a phone call. I was in my tiny apartment, the kind of place where wires tangled across the floor and the air smelled faintly of burnt coffee. My single had just made it onto the radio, a moment I thought would finally push me through the door I'd been pounding on for years. When that call came in, I didn't think twice about answering. The voice on the other end didn't waste time with pleasantries. It was sharp, cold, and confident, like the speaker already knew every detail of my life. They told me Beyoncé had heard my track. She liked it. She wanted to hear me live. Those words hit like lightning. Beyoncé, not an agent, not a label representative, Beyoncé herself. I paced my apartment, heart pounding, repeating the words just to believe them. Before I could process, they mentioned a gift. 5 minutes later, a courier arrived at my door carrying a black envelope. Inside was something strange, a pitch black credit card. No name, no numbers, just the Rock Nation logo, etched into the surface like it had been burned there. I flipped it over in my hands, and it felt heavier than it should, as if it carried more than money. The voice called again. Use it. Get something sharp. Tonight is big for you. They didn't answer when I asked how much I could spend. They just laughed and said, whatever you want. That should have been my first warning. Nothing in this industry comes without a price. I went out, flashing the card at a store in Soho where I never would have been welcomed otherwise. The moment they saw it, the staff moved like clockwork. I was dressed, measured, tailored in silence. At one point, when I caught my reflection in the glass, I could swear my face looked distorted, like the shadows bent differently around me. I shook it off, but the thought stayed. By the time I left, I was wearing a crimson jacket that clung to me like it belonged to someone else. The card sat heavy in my pocket, and when I slid back into the waiting SUV, I realized I wasn't driving toward a dream. I was being delivered somewhere I hadn't chosen. The hotel loomed tall, its marble glowing in the streetlight. The elevator doors reflected me back in a dozen fractured ways. When the numbers ticked higher, I swear the hum of the machine deepened into a pulse, like the walls themselves had a heartbeat. By the time I stepped into the penthouse, the silence was already waiting. It didn't feel empty. It felt like the room was holding its breath. And then I saw it. The golden microphone hanging from the ceiling, gleaming like it was alive. Its surface shimmered with etched patterns that shifted in the candlelight, curling like veins. I moved closer, and just as I reached out, I heard the voice behind me. Smooth, recognizable. You like it? I turned, and my entire body went cold. That was the first moment I realized I wasn't just here to perform. I was here to witness something I didn't understand. I froze in place, my eyes dragging slowly from the microphone to the doorway. She was standing there, framed by candlelight, her presence filling the room long before her voice did. Beyoncé. Her dress shimmered like molten gold clinging to her form. And for a second, my mind couldn't decide if she looked like a goddess or a predator. I stammered something. I don't even remember what, but she smiled, and the curve of her lips wasn't comfort. It was control. She glided across the floor, her steps soundless against the thick carpet, her gaze locked on mine like she was reading every thought I tried to bury. She touched the microphone, and I swear I saw it shiver. The etched lines across its surface rippled like water disturbed by a stone. "This microphone is special," she whispered. "It remembers." The words sank into me, heavy, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. She gestured to the bed behind her. "Sit." My instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs didn't listen. The mattress swallowed me, soft and suffocating. She sat beside me, her warmth almost unbearable in the thick air. Then I heard it, the low murmur from the shadows, a cadence I'd recognize anywhere. Jay-Z. His voice rolled through the room like distant thunder. Another figure leaned forward beside him, the glint of diamonds catching the candlelight. Diddy. They didn't move much. They didn't have to. Their presence was enough to make the room shrink. Beyoncé leaned closer, her breath warm on my ear. "All you have to do is sing with me," she said. "Just a duet. Let the microphone hear you. It will protect you." Her hand slid over mine, cool against my clammy skin. The microphone above us swayed gently, its cord creaking like a noose. For a second, I thought I heard it inhale, a wet, dragging breath that didn't belong to anyone in the room. My stomach twisted. Jay-Z shifted in the shadows, his eyes catching the flames. Twin points of fire stared back at me. He rose slowly, deliberate, each step like a verdict. He poured a drink, handed it to me. His fingers brushed mine, cold as ice. His smile widened, and behind it, I saw something hungry, something not meant for human eyes. I swallowed hard, took a desperate sip. The taste was sharp, metallic, burning down my throat. The room spun, shadows lengthening, whispers thickening like smoke curling from the walls. Beyoncé's face was the last thing I saw before darkness slammed shut around me. Her eyes glowing faintly, her lips curved into that knowing smile. When I woke, it wasn't in the penthouse. I was back in my apartment, sweat-soaked, head pounding, bile clinging to the back of my throat. The air still smelled of incense and blood. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, its cracked screen flickering with headlines that tore my world apart. Scandal, accusations. My name dragged through the dirt in stories I'd never lived. My streaming account suspended. Every song, every track I had ever uploaded gone. My career erased in hours. And then the call came. No ID, just static at first, then a voice, low and distorted. The microphone protects those who sing to it. I dropped the phone, my hands shaking, and in the dark reflection on the wall, I thought I saw it again. That faint golden shimmer swaying gently over my bed, like it had followed me home. That was the night I realized I wasn't being invited into success. I was being pulled into something far older and far darker than the music industry ever wanted the world to see. The scandal destroyed me overnight. But what gnawed at me wasn't the loss of my music, or even the headlines that made me into someone I wasn't. It was the sound that lingered after the phone went dead. That wet inhale from the golden microphone. The hiss of something alive hiding inside it. I tried to push it out of my mind. Days blurred. Sleep slipped through my fingers. But the more I fought, the stronger the pull became. I started dreaming of doors, heavy wooden ones, each leading to a room with no windows and a microphone swaying in the dark. Sometimes, I'd hear a voice in those dreams. Not Beyoncé's, not mine. Higher, softer, aching with something human that felt half buried. That's how I found myself standing in front of an abandoned building on a rainy night in Brooklyn, 20 years older than I felt. The old studio, Studio C. Its sign was gone, its awning rusted, but I knew where I was. I hadn't been back in decades, and yet the sight of it tightened my chest like it had been waiting for me. The door was unlocked. The hall smelled of mildew and forgotten power. Studio A was gutted, Studio B stripped bare, but Studio C, sealed, silent, waiting. My hand trembled on the doorknob, my palms slick with sweat, my heartbeat refusing to slow. Not because I didn't know what I'd find, but because I did. When I stepped inside, the air was different. Dust floated like ash, but the room hadn't aged. A red LED blinked faintly on the console, alive when nothing else was. A chair sat turned toward the booth, lipstick smeared faintly across the isolation glass. The second I touched the mixing board, my chest clenched. A pulse throbbed through my bones, dragging me backward in time. I wasn't standing in an empty room anymore. I was there again, 20 years earlier, watching Aaliyah. She was in the booth, headphones slipping down, her lip caught between her teeth. Not nervous about the track, no, about the room. Her eyes kept darting to the floor, her fingers tapping out seconds only she could hear. Her mouth formed words the mic didn't pick up. Don't leave. I didn't understand then. But now, with the weight of memory pressing down on me, I realized she hadn't been afraid of something happening to her. She was afraid of what would happen if no one was left to see it. On the console, a file label blinked faintly in the dark. Vox, Merge, Final Res. Not one of mine. Not hers either. My stomach dropped. It was a remnant of something that didn't belong to either of us. Something stitched together after that last night. The hum in the walls deepened. This wasn't sound. It was memory bleeding back through the plaster. Vibration stored too long. And then her voice whispered in my head. Words she'd said just a week before her plane went down. They don't want a performance. They want a permission. I didn't believe her then. I thought it was label politics, contracts, power plays. But standing in that room, every bone in me knew better. This wasn't about music. This was about transfer, about taking what couldn't be given freely. In the corner of the booth, half hidden, I saw the panel. The one I'd always assumed was an access hatch. It was open now, revealing a stairwell sinking into red insulated silence. I knew where it led. I had heard the whispers about it years ago, but never dared follow them. That night, I did. The steps were narrow, steep, lined with foam to kill vibration. The air grew colder with every step, heavy with the metallic tang of blood and old wires. At the bottom was a room I'd never seen on any blueprint. A perfect circle, no windows, no gear, just a golden microphone hanging over a black painted ring in the floor, symbols etched around its edge. And then she walked in. Not Aaliyah, Beyoncé. No fanfare, no stage makeup, just her in a black hoodie, bare-faced, expressionless. She didn't look at me. She didn't even acknowledge me. She stepped into the circle beneath the mic, took a breath, and started to sing. It wasn't one of her songs. It was one of Aaliyah's, an unreleased run I remembered from late sessions. My heart clenched. She sang it perfectly, too perfectly. Not just the notes, but the phrasing, the hesitation, the breath at the end. Things no one else had ever heard. Her voice wasn't just mimicry, it was replacement. And beneath it, faint at first, I heard a second voice. Not harmony, not echo. Aaliyah's, fading line by line as Beyoncé's tone grew heavier, deeper, richer. She wasn't just singing, she was taking. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But my legs stayed rooted. Because in that moment, with Jay-Z's shadow leaning against the wall, watching like a man waiting for a download to finish, I realized the truth. This wasn't superstition. This wasn't rumor. This was the vault, and I was standing inside it. The room was silent except for her voice. It rose and fell like something rehearsed 1,000 times, yet I knew it couldn't have been. Aaliyah's unreleased melody twisted out of Beyoncé's throat as if it had always belonged to her. Perfect phrasing, perfect timing. Even the small exhale Aaliyah used to leave at the end of a line was there, echoing across the circular chamber like a ghost no one had invited. Halfway through, something shifted. Beyoncé's hands trembled. She pressed one against her stomach as if steadying herself, but her face stayed calm, her eyes closed. And then her tone deepened, rich and textured in a way I had only ever heard from one person before. That same haunted softness that lingered in Aaliyah's voice, even in her brightest tracks, was there now, layered into Beyoncé's. My breath caught in my throat because it wasn't just mimicry anymore. It wasn't just performance, it was channeling. Jay-Z didn't move. He stood in the shadows near the stairs, silent, his presence heavy enough to make the air feel thinner. He looked like a man waiting for something inevitable, like he had done this before, like he knew exactly when the final note would land. And then it came. Beyoncé's last line lingered, suspended in the air like a thread pulled too tight. Her lips parted, her eyes opened, and when she smiled, it wasn't for the crowd, wasn't for a stage. It was relief, like someone who had been carrying a weight far too long and finally set it down. She turned toward me, and in that instant, my stomach dropped, because what she said wasn't mine. It wasn't hers. It was a name. My name, but not the one anyone else had ever used. It was the nickname Aaliyah had whispered to me years earlier in the booth upstairs. A secret I thought had died with her. Beyoncé tilted her head slightly, her eyes locking onto mine with eerie precision. And she said it. Clear, deliberate, impossible. Every hair on my body stood on end. My chest tightened, my mind refusing to accept what I had just heard. No one else knew that name. No one. She didn't wait for a reaction. She stepped out of the black circle, climbed the stairs without a word, and vanished through the panel I had entered from. Jay-Z followed, not speaking, not breaking his stare, just leaving me with a glance that was part warning, part confirmation. And then I was alone. I stood in that circular vault for what felt like hours, my ears still ringing with her voice. The microphone above me hung motionless, yet I swore I could still hear it breathing. A low, rhythmic inhale, like the golden coils were pulling the last fragments of someone's soul into its core. When I finally tore myself away and returned to the booth upstairs, I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it, that I was exhausted, delirious, maybe even poisoned by that drink Jay-Z had handed me earlier. But deep down, I knew what I had witnessed. This wasn't a performance, this was a transfer. And Beyoncé hadn't just sung. She had taken something Aaliyah had refused to give. I told myself I would never come back, that I would lock this memory in the deepest part of my mind and never let it see daylight. But memory has a way of pulling you back. And years later, when I stood once again in that old studio staring at the panel in the booth, I knew my body had returned me here for a reason. Because some vaults don't just hold sound, they hold memory. And once you've heard it, it never fully lets you go. Back in the present, I found myself drawn to the same stairwell. The panel in the booth hung open like it had been waiting for me, the same red insulation lining the narrow passage. I told myself I was only looking, only remembering. But the truth was, I was being pulled. The vault calls you back in ways you can't fight. The booth itself felt different this time. Older, heavier, the air thick with dust and the sour tang of metal. The foam on the walls crumbled at my touch, disintegrating into flakes that clung to my skin. Overhead, a single bulb flickered once and went out, leaving me in a dim red glow from the standby light on the mixing board. That's when I noticed it. In the corner, half buried under wires and debris, sat a reel-to-reel machine. Rusted, grimy, but still turning. Slowly, endlessly. A blank reel spinning in silence. Nobody had used tape like that in years. Not since long before Aaliyah's last sessions. And yet here it was, alive when everything else was dead. I reached toward it, and the second my fingers brushed the cold casing, a memory hit me. Not mine, not entirely. I was outside again, years earlier, standing by a black SUV parked outside the studio. Aaliyah in the back seat, Jay-Z leaning toward her in the front. I couldn't hear the words, not clearly, but the tone cut like glass. Cold. Final. If you don't want it, there's someone else already lined up. At the time, I thought he meant a track, a project, but standing there in the booth decades later, I understood. He hadn't been talking about music. He'd been talking about her voice, about her place, about Beyoncé. My throat tightened. The memory didn't let me go. It came in pieces. Jay-Z visiting the studio more often during those last months, not to collaborate, not to advise, but to watch. Always in the corner, silent, his eyes on her like a man measuring time. His instructions to me: capture everything. Don't delete the raw takes. Keep the board live even when she stops. I had thought it was control, perfectionism. Now I realized it was preparation. He wasn't preserving her music. He was preserving her. The reel clicked. A faint scratch of rotation filled the silence. And then, layered beneath it, a hum. Low, vibrating through the floor, through my bones. The same hum I'd felt years ago in Studio C. I turned toward the door, panic rising. My hand gripped the knob and twisted. Nothing. It didn't budge. I twisted harder, shoved my weight against it. Still locked. My stomach sank. The booth door had never locked from the inside. It wasn't designed that way. But now it was sealed tight, as if the room itself had decided I wasn't leaving. The microphone above me crackled on with a sharp hiss. I hadn't touched a switch. Dust shook loose from its casing as it lowered slightly, hanging over me like an executioner's blade. Then I heard them. The voices. Not one, but many. Layered. Rising in a drone. Aaliyah. Beyoncé. Others I didn't recognize. Their tones overlapping like 100 unfinished songs stitched into one endless loop. And they all whispered the same word. and sing. I stumbled back, pressing against the sealed glass, my heart hammering against my ribs. No, I muttered. I'm not part of this. But the reel spun faster. Jay-Z's figure flickered into view through the scratched glass, not in flesh, but in memory so sharp it felt present. His eyes locked on mine, cold, empty. He held the reel in his hand like it belonged to him. Sing, he said. Flat. Final. The word warped as he repeated it. Deeper on the second, distorted on the third. By the fourth, it didn't sound like him anymore. It sounded like something older, or something wearing his voice like a mask. The air thickened, pressing against my lungs. The voices surged louder, 1,000 tones twisting together into a single command. The booth vibrated, walls humming like a living thing. I dropped to my knees. Hands clamped over my ears, my own voice cracked out of me in a whisper. I didn't say yes. And then, silence. When I opened my eyes, the reel was gone. Jay-Z's figure vanished. The booth door swung open with no resistance. The microphone above me hung still as if it had never moved at all. I staggered into the hallway, trembling, dust clinging to my clothes. My body remembered what had happened, but already my mind was slipping. The details were dissolving like static in sunlight. I fought to hold on to them, but they peeled away, one by one, leaving only fragments. One truth stayed sharp, though, even as everything else blurred. This wasn't just a studio. This was a vault, a container for memory, for sound, for souls. And once you entered, the vault never truly let you leave. The forgetting should have been a relief. That's what most people would think. Losing the weight of a nightmare. Watching the sharp edges dull until you could almost believe it never happened. But with a vault, it isn't that simple. The details slip, yes, but not the truth. The truth stays lodged in your chest like a shard of glass you can't remove. I tried to live normally again, to convince myself I had imagined it all. I listened to Beyoncé on the radio, her voice pouring out of speakers with its usual polish and power. People called it flawless, called her the greatest of her generation. But I couldn't unhear what I had heard in that vault. Her runs, her phrasing, her breath, the perfection was undeniable. But perfection isn't human. What chilled me wasn't how strong she sounded. It was how familiar it was. The faint hesitations, the small exhalations, the haunted softness that once belonged only to Aaliyah. Now they lived in Beyoncé's voice, and the world celebrated them without knowing whose echo they carried. At award shows, when she sang, I caught it again. A fleeting shadow beneath her tone, a ghostly layer that didn't belong. It was like standing at the edge of a hallway, hearing two sets of footsteps when only one person was in view. Most people didn't notice. Why would they? They weren't listening for it. But once you've been inside the vault, once you've heard the voices overlapping, you can never listen the same way again. I thought about the look she gave me that night in the circle. The impossible nickname she spoke. A word she couldn't have known unless it had been carried to her through something darker than memory. That smile wasn't performance. It wasn't gratitude. It was recognition. Like she knew exactly what had been taken and from whom. And Jay-Z, he was always there, watching, silent. His presence didn't feel like protection, though. It felt like guardianship. Not of her, not of the music, but of the vault itself. He wasn't just a husband, a partner, a mogul. He was the gatekeeper of the thing no one else was supposed to see. I began to notice something else. Every time Beyoncé spoke about destiny, about legacy, about being chosen, her words bent differently in my ears. They weren't just metaphors anymore. They sounded like acknowledgments, coded confessions wrapped in performance. She hadn't just climbed to the top. She had been pulled, placed, fitted with something that was never meant for her, but that she had chosen to carry. The world saw her as untouchable. I saw her as someone who had stepped into a circle, stood under a golden mic, and said yes when another had said no. And from that moment, her voice was never just her own again. The vault had given her everything, but the vault always takes something in return. And I was left with the dread of knowing that if it followed me, if I could still hear the hum in empty rooms, still see that golden shimmer in dark corners, then maybe it hadn't finished taking. Not from me, not from anyone. Leaving that building should have ended it. That's what I kept telling myself. I had stepped back into sunlight, into air that wasn't thick with incense and dust, into streets that bustled with life. But the vault doesn't let go that easily. It follows, not like a memory you carry, but like a shadow that carries you. The first signs were small, static in my phone call, even when no one else noticed it. Late at night, when the line should have been clear, I would hear faint breathing on the other end, timed too perfectly to be interference. Once, I heard a voice buried under the crackle, faint but certain. It whispered that same word the vault had demanded of me. Sing. I stopped listening to music before bed. It didn't matter. The silence in my apartment wasn't silent anymore. Some nights, lying awake, I would hear a low hum in the walls, as if the plaster itself was vibrating. Other nights, I'd see it. A faint golden shimmer above my bed, swaying gently in the darkness like a pendulum, just as it had in the vault. The more I tried to ignore it, the more it pressed itself into my life. My laptop would flicker with old project files I didn't remember opening. My phone would buzz with no notification, just a red waveform pulsing on the screen, recording without my permission. And always, behind it all, that whisper of layered voices, Aaliyah, Beyoncé, others I couldn't place, looping together like a choir that wasn't meant for human ears. And then, there was her, Beyoncé. She was everywhere, of course, on screens, on billboards, at the center of every conversation about greatness. But to me, every performance now felt like a warning. I'd watch her live, her voice soaring flawless across stadiums, and I'd catch the faintest slip beneath it. A second tone, buried deep. Not harmony, not echo, an imprint, a voice that wasn't supposed to be there. The world saw perfection. I saw possession. The memory of that night in the vault clung to me, even as the details eroded. Her smile as she spoke Aaliyah's secret nickname. Jay-Z standing like a sentry at the edge of the circle, the hum that grew louder each time I tried to turn away. They all blurred together, but the feeling stayed sharp. I had witnessed something the world wasn't supposed to know, and it changed how I saw her forever. Beyoncé wasn't just an artist anymore. She wasn't just a star who rose on talent and work. She was something else now, someone who had stood under the golden mic and let it breathe her in. Let it bind her voice to something older, something hungry. The vault didn't just change her, it marked her. And every time I heard her sing, I heard it too. Not her alone. Never just her. That's when I realized The vault doesn't stay in one place. It moves through sound, through memory, through the people who let it in. And once it finds you, it doesn't need walls to hold you anymore. It was already inside my life. And the more I tried to resist, the louder it called. I thought I could outrun it. I thought if I kept myself busy, drowned out the silence with noise, I could shut the vault out. But you can't outrun something that isn't chasing you. The vault doesn't chase, it waits. And when you slip, when your guard lowers even for a moment, it pulls you back. The first time it happened, I was sitting at my desk late at night, staring at a blank screen. My speakers weren't on, my system volume muted, yet a faint hiss began to creep from the edges of the room. At first I thought it was in my head, tinnitus from stress, but then it shaped itself into rhythm, into breath. A slow inhale, wet and heavy, followed by a drag of exhale. Exactly like the golden microphone had sounded that night above the circle. I tried to ignore it, but then my screen flickered. The desktop vanished, replaced by a waveform pulsing across black, red, alive, recording. My laptop wasn't connected to anything. No mic, no input. But the lines danced anyway, as if something on the other side was speaking directly into it. I slammed the lid shut, but I could still hear it, faint, rising, voices whispering in unison. That same word. Sing. The second time, it wasn't technology. It was my apartment itself. I woke in the middle of the night to find my bedroom door open. I knew I had locked it. I always locked it. On the floor, just inside the doorway, lay a cord. Not mine. Thick, black, coiled like a snake. I followed it with my eyes, my pulse hammering. It trailed across the room, up the wall, into the ceiling, and dangling above my bed was a faint shimmer of gold. The microphone. Waiting. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even move. I just sat frozen in the corner, staring until the first light of morning made it vanish. By the third time, it stopped hiding. I was walking down a crowded street when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a call. Instead, the screen was black. And in its reflection, just for an instant, I saw him. Jay-Z, not in flesh, but clearer than a memory. Leaning in the background, his expression blank, his eyes burning like twin embers. No one else reacted. People brushed past me, oblivious, but I felt the weight of his gaze pressing through the glass, the same way he had watched from the shadows in the vault. Not saying a word, not needing to. His silence was a summons. That night, the dreams returned. Doors, stairwells, panels opening into hidden rooms, the golden mic swaying gently in the dark, its cord humming like a heartbeat. And always, her voice, Beyoncé's, but layered beneath it, faint and fading, was Aaliyah's. Their tones meshed, indistinguishable, inseparable, one voice made of two. When I woke, I knew the truth. The vault wasn't finished with me. It had let me leave once, but only because it wanted me to carry it out with me. It wanted me to remember enough to come back, to sit under the mic again, to let it decide if I would sing or be silenced. The second session was waiting, and I knew, deep down, I wouldn't be able to refuse it. I didn't plan to return. I told myself I'd never set foot near that building again. But that's how the vault works. It doesn't wait for you to plan. It erodes your resistance until going back feels inevitable. It started with a message. No name, no number, just a blank notification on my cracked phone screen. Midnight, Studio C. the same words I'd once received years ago after Aaliyah was gone. My throat went dry. I should have deleted it. I should have thrown the phone away. Instead, I found myself pacing my apartment, the city noise outside thinning into silence as the night dragged closer to that hour. And then, without even deciding, I was there. The streets were empty, the building darker than I remembered. The side door was already ajar, the same way it had been the first time. It was like someone had left it open, not for anyone, but specifically for me. Inside, the air hit me like a wall. Stale, metallic, heavy with a pressure that made my ears ring. Studio A and B were still gutted. Studio C, still intact, still waiting. The red standby light blinked faintly from the console, like an eye watching me approach. I told myself I wouldn't touch anything, but my hand went to the panel anyway. It opened without resistance. The stairwell yawned below, narrow and suffocating. My legs moved on their own. Each step downward felt like descending into something older than the city itself, something carved not for music, but for ritual. The vault hadn't changed. The circle was still there, black paint etched with faint notations, the golden microphone swaying gently as if it had been waiting for the air to stir again. Dust should have coated everything. Instead, the floor looked polished, as though countless feet had worn it smooth. And then, I wasn't alone. From the shadows at the top of the stairs, he appeared. Jay-Z, not rushing, not speaking, just leaning against the frame the same way I'd seen him years ago, as if this was already decided. His silence was more commanding than words. The microphone lowered slightly, the cord creaking. I could feel the pull in my chest, like my breath was no longer mine. The circle below it waited, a black ring that seemed to hum faintly with every beat of my heart. My feet moved forward. I didn't want them to, but the air pushed me, pulled me, guided me until I stood beneath the mic. The heat of the room pressed down, thick as velvet. My throat was dry, but I could feel it. The expectation, the demand. The voices rose slowly, filling the chamber. First one, then another, then dozens layered over each other, indistinct but relentless. Aaliyah, Beyoncé, others I couldn't name. Their whispers wove together until they became a single word, stretched and drawn. Sing. I shook my head, tears burning the corners of my eyes. No, I whispered, barely able to force sound through my tight chest. I never agreed. The mic swayed closer. The etched patterns along its body glowed faintly, curling and shifting like living veins. It inhaled, deep, wet, hungry. The sound raked through my bones. And then, her voice, clear, sharp, Beyoncé's. Not from my memory, not from my imagination, from the microphone itself. She was singing, flawless as always, her tone commanding, perfected. But beneath it, I heard another. Softer, aching, fighting to rise, but being swallowed whole. Aaliyah. The realization hit me like ice in my veins. This was the second session. Not just for me, for her. For anyone who stepped under that mic and didn't refuse. Every voice that said yes fed the vault. Every voice that said no left silence behind. Jay-Z's figure didn't move. His eyes locked on me, glowing faintly in the dim. He didn't need to say anything. His presence was enough. I clenched my fists, my body trembling, my voice strangled in my throat. The air thickened. The whispers sharpened into a single command that rattled the walls. Sing. And in that moment, I knew. If I opened my mouth, I wouldn't just be singing. I would be giving something away. Something I could never take back. I stood there, frozen under the golden mic, my whole body trembling. The air pressed down on me like water, heavy, suffocating. Every breath felt stolen, borrowed from something that wanted it back. The voices grew louder, rising like a storm, all weaving together into that one relentless word. Sing. My lips parted, but nothing came out. My throat locked, my chest heaved, my will fighting against the weight pressing me down. I thought of Aaliyah, the way she had whispered, "Don't leave," all those years ago. She hadn't been afraid of dying. She had been afraid of this. The microphone, the vault, what it takes when you refuse. "No," I whispered, the word barely audible. The chamber reacted instantly. The glow along the microphone flared, veins of gold twisting and writhing like a living thing. The hum in the walls sharpened into a piercing tone that drilled into my skull. The voices shifted, no longer coaxing but snarling, layering into a chorus of anger. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head as the sound clawed through me. My vision blurred. The circle on the floor began to pulse, the black paint rippling as if something beneath was trying to claw its way out. Jay-Z's figure stayed at the edge of the stairwell, unmoving. His silence was worse than if he had shouted. He just watched, eyes glowing faintly, as though this was the part he had seen countless times before, as though he knew exactly how far the vault could push before it broke someone. The microphone lowered closer, its cord tightening, the head swaying inches from my face. I felt its breath, hot, damp, metallic, washing over me. It wasn't just waiting for a song, it wanted surrender. My body convulsed. The word clawed up my throat, trying to force its way out. Not mine, not my voice. Something else using me as a vessel. My lips trembled, sound building in my chest. If I let it out even once, I knew I'd never get it back. I slammed my fist into the floor. "No!" The chamber erupted. The lights above shattered, plunging the vault into darkness broken only by the faint red glow of the symbols on the floor. The voices screeched in unison, so loud I thought my eardrums would burst. The mic swung violently, the cord thrashing like it was alive. And then, silence. The air stilled. My chest heaved. Sweat dripped from my face onto the black painted floor. The microphone hung limp, lifeless, its glow extinguished. I forced myself to look up. The stairwell was empty. Jay-Z was gone. No figure, no eyes, no watchful presence. Just the echo of where he had been. I staggered to my feet, my body weak, my vision swimming. The circle beneath me looked different now, faded, drained, as though saying no had burned something out of it. I stumbled back toward the stairs, gripping the rail to keep from collapsing. My ears rang, my throat raw, my entire body aching as if I had been torn apart and stitched back together. But through it all, one truth burned in my chest. I hadn't sung. I hadn't given it what it wanted. And that, I realized, might be the only reason I was still alive. But survival came with a price, because even though I had resisted, the vault wasn't finished. The forgetting would come. The memories would fade. And one day soon, I knew I'd wake up with only fragments again. Fragments. And the certainty that Beyoncé's voice still carried the proof of what I'd refused. When I finally climbed out of the stairwell, I half expected the studio above to be in ruins, but Studio C looked almost the same as when I had entered. The console glowed faintly, its red standby light pulsing like a calm heartbeat, as if nothing had happened. Dust hung in the air, undisturbed. The chair sat turned toward the booth, waiting. It would have been easy to convince myself it was all in my head. Easy to say the vault was a hallucination, a fever dream born out of fear and obsession. But my hands told another story. They shook uncontrollably, dust still clinging to my skin, my knuckles bruised from pounding the floor. My throat was raw as though I had screamed for hours. My body remembered what my mind was already trying to forget. That's the curse of the vault. It lets you leave, but it doesn't let you keep everything. By the time I reached the main door, pieces were already slipping away. The voices, the pulsing symbols, even Jay-Z's glowing eyes, all dissolving like smoke in sunlight. But one thing didn't fade. One thought refused to die. Beyoncé. Her voice, her presence in that circle, the impossible way she had spoken Aaliyah's private name to me, as if the vault itself had passed it into her. That memory clung to me with sharp teeth. No matter how much the forgetting scraped at the edges, I couldn't lose that moment. And it changed everything. Because once you've heard the transfer, once you've seen the vault take a voice and fold it into someone else, you can't listen the same way again. Every song, every performance, every flawless note carried a shadow now, a double voice hidden beneath the perfection. The world celebrated her as untouchable, but I knew better. I knew what her voice cost. It wasn't just talent, training, or destiny. It was a deal struck in silence, sealed under a golden microphone in a windowless room. Jay-Z didn't need to speak. He didn't need to defend it. His silence was enough. He wasn't just guarding her career. He was guarding the vault itself, the machine that had rewritten music history in whispers and shadows. And me? I carried fragments, enough to haunt me, never enough to prove. That's how the vault protects itself. It lets you remember just enough to know the truth, but not enough to make anyone else believe it. Sometimes, when I hear Beyoncé sing, I close my eyes and let the notes wash over me. To anyone else, it's perfection. But to me, it's layered. I hear Aaliyah in the cracks, faint and fleeting, like someone trying to surface through water. I hear the ache that was never meant to be hers. And I know the vault is still out there, waiting, recording, hungry. What I found inside it didn't just make me see Beyoncé differently. It made me see the entire industry differently. Success wasn't just built, it was borrowed. Voices weren't just raised, they were transferred, traded, stolen. The vault doesn't care who you are, only if you'll step inside. And once you do, you're never the same. I never sang. That's the only reason I'm here to tell you this. But every day I wonder, if I had opened my mouth, if I had given the vault what it wanted, would I even still be me? Or would my voice already belong to someone else, echoing through songs the world thinks are flawless? I'll never know. But I do know this. Beyoncé's perfection was never just hers. And once you know that, you can never listen the same way again.